Welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of What's Cooking. My name is Meredith, and tonight, what's cooking is meatloaf. Good old-fashioned meatloaf. Mashed potatoes, side of green beans. Pretty simple meal tonight, but I have a secret. If you guys have a hard time getting your kids to eat vegetables, I have a little secret tonight on how to kind of sneak some into your mashed potatoes. So make sure you stay tuned for that. First, we're going to start with our meatloaf, though, because it takes the longest to bake. And I just used my mom's recipe. She taught me how to make meatloaf. That's how I've always made meatloaf. So that's how I'm going to show you guys how to do it. So I'm going to kind of be playing around with it, I guess, as I go, because she and I, neither of us, have ever really measured anything. We just eyeball it. So in order to make an actual written recipe, I'm going to try and estimate about how much of each thing I'm using so you guys can duplicate it at home. So first, I'm starting off with about a pound of ground beef. I think it's a little over a pound. That's fine, just around a pound. So we're going to add 1 egg. That I know for sure. And then, so rinse my fingers. I add oatmeal. My mom has always added oatmeal instead of like breadcrumbs. I know a lot of people do breadcrumbs, but my mom has always done oatmeal. So I'm going to start with half a cup. Don't know if that's going to be enough or not. It looks like it's about right. So we'll kind of see once I get it all mixed together. I may have to add a little more, but half a cup to start. And then I'm just going to put in a nice big spoonful of garlic. That's probably about 2 teaspoons. Minced garlic, some ketchup. You guys can play around with what seasonings you put in here too. I've done like Italian seasoning. I've done, like making it more spicy. Totally up to you. All right, that's probably about 2 tablespoons of ketchup. 1.5 tablespoons, 2 tablespoons, somewhere in there. And then mustard. If you want to, you don't really taste the mustard. I mean, my oldest hates mustard. He never knows it's in here. It just adds flavor and acidity to it, and it tastes good, but he doesn't know it's in there. So I'm going to put probably about 1 tablespoon of mustard in. And then salt and pepper. And that's really it. Like, it's pretty simple. Again, if you guys want to add, other kinds of seasonings, it's totally up to you. Maybe it goes with something that you're serving the meatloaf with, if you're doing like a seasoned potato or something like that. But tonight we're just going kind of easy, minimal, bare bones meatloaf, whatevs. So salt and pepper. I don't usually add too much because you can always add some later, but you don't really need to. I mean, the ketchup and the mustard add enough seasoning to it that you don't really need to add a ton of ketchup and mustard. Now, a lot of people like to mix their meatloaf with their hands. I used to do that. I don't like doing that anymore because it gets so greasy and gross, and I have a hard time getting all of the meat fat off of my hands. So I use a spoon. I sometimes finish it off with a couple of good squeezes with my hand, but I started out mixing it with a spoon and just kind of like pressing to make sure that oatmeal is really mixed in. Half a cup looks pretty good, actually. I don't think I'm going to need to add any more. You just want to make sure that there's enough in there that it's going to help to hold the meatloaf together. Because that egg kind of makes things juicy, but it will help to bind it together. But you're adding liquid with ketchup and mustard and garlic and stuff like that. So, and my meatloaf tends to fall apart no matter what, and that's okay. It doesn't matter. It's always falling apart. My mom's is always falling apart. Whatever. It's how you make it. I don't like to make it real dense, so I don't like to form it real tight. And I think that's part of why it falls apart, because I don't pack it together and make it real dense like that. So make sure you've got your pan. I'm just using a regular loaf pan. I have one pan that I designate just for meatloaf. It's kind of icky in the bottom now because it's only meatloaf pan. So You just use a loaf pan, and I will kind of grab this together and scrape the rest out. I just don't like it all under my fingernails. It's so gross. And just kind of make it into like a log, a loaf. You can pat it as much as you want. Again, I don't like making it real thick because then it gets kind of dense. So make it into a little log, drop it in there, and then pop it in the oven at 350. I'll probably bake this. I'll start it for about a half an hour and then check it. You want to make sure that it's not like overdone. So I usually cook it a little less and check it first. It also depends on how much meat you're using. So again, this is just over a pound. I'll double check it at about a half an hour, and then stay tuned because I'm going to be making those mashed potatoes with the secret vegetable ingredient next. Okay, so I'm back to show you my little secret mashed potatoes. I have a pot here full of cold water. I diced up 4 small russet potatoes since we are adding a veg to it. And the secret ingredient, parsnips. I am adding 2 parsnips, about small to medium size. You just peel them and cut them about the same dice as your potatoes so they all cook about evenly. And your kids will never know that they're in there. They add a nice flavor to the potatoes without making it obvious that it's like a vegetable in there. So, love parsnips. They also work really well if you're doing like a mashed sweet potato. That you can throw parsnips in there too. You could also use like rutabagas or turnips, any white root vegetable like that. Your kids will never even know that they're in there because they're the same color as the potatoes. So those are in there. I am just going to pop this on and bring this to a boil, and then boil these until they're soft. And then once it's almost done, that's when I'm going to get my green beans because I'm just going to steam those in the microwave for like 3 minutes. So I'll be back. Okay, so my meatloaf is done. I'm just going to let it hang out in the oven. I turned the heat off, but I'm just going to let it sit in there while I finish up. I just put my green beans in a Corningware, snapped off those little stem ends, put about a 1/4 cup of water in there, and I'm just going to put it in the microwave for about 3 minutes. Check them. If they need a little longer, then they need a little longer. Jackson. So those are going to go in and start for 3 minutes. I have my potatoes and parsnips that I've drained and then put back into the pot. I added a couple of tablespoons of milk. I used unsweetened almond milk, but you can use whatever milk you want. About 1.5 tablespoons of butter. And then,
Is it a butterball?
Yeah, it's a butterball. I'm just going to add a teaspoon and a half of garlic, salt and pepper, mash them up. And if I need to add a little more liquid, I will. It always kind of depends, so it's never really set in stone how much you're going to use. And then everything will be done. The meatloaf ended up taking about 50 minutes. So again, it depends on how much meat you're using, how thick your loaf is, how wide it is. Sometimes I try and like squish it, make it a little longer so it cooks faster. It just didn't tonight, so you just kind of have to keep an eye on it. That's why I always just put it in for half an hour and check it, and then kind of do it in 5 to 10 minute increments depending on how soft it still is. So that's meatloaf, sneaky mashed potatoes, and green beans, and that's it for tonight. So thank you guys for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button and the bell icon to make sure you get notifications every time I post a video. If you're watching this over on Instagram, make sure you head over to my profile and follow me over there. Leave some comments, let me know. Recipes are in the link below, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.